Okay, well, welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. Today, we'll be talking about the brain and how it works. And with me is Dr. Patrick Porter, and the creator and founder of BrainTap. Dr. Porter, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to get connected and appreciate the connection through the folks at Biohacking Congress. You'll be speaking there in, I guess as the day of the recording, in just a few weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. We're looking forward to it. Great group out there.
Yeah. So BrainTap, interesting name. I'm going to tap the brain to pull everything out. And so what exactly is BrainTap?
Well, BrainTap's a technology that's going to help you maximize brain function. We call it brain plasticity, what in science they call neuroplasticity, but we're going to do that with light, sound, and vibration. You can also use an app. So we have an app, and then we have a hardware component. It can be used either way. You can use it with just the app and get results. We have a lot of science around that. A lot of our research we've done just with the app because you can scale that across the world and no problem. And then we have the hardware, which is using light where your eyes are closed. It's going to be using light, what they call frequency following response, to guide the brain into the different brain waves. And then we have lights in the ears, which usually sometimes kind of baffles people. Why do we have lights in the ears? But the reality is that our cells have something called chromophores on them. And those chromophores are like little batteries, and they absorb energy in the form of light, sound, and vibration. That's why we have and then in the ears, we have auricular therapy. So that means there's all the junction points for meridians are in the ears. So if we use photobiomodulation, we're using frequency derived light. It's not just red and blue light. A lot of people, we've actually tuned the LEDs to have the solfeggio and Noget frequencies. So it's moving through the different frequency channels. So you're actually dosing the body with frequencies as well as light and sound. And then there's a message. We know that we can actually trigger or upregulate 2,300 different gene expressions by the words we choose. So we use a lot of positive psychology in the program.
That is fascinating. And it's pretty cool that you integrate all these different modalities, I'll call it, that seem to be complementary. So how do you get into figuring this out with the brain? Like, what's kind of your kind of Genesis 1-1, so to speak?
Yeah. My journey started when I was very young. My dad got help as an alcoholic through something called the Silva method. And I was a troublemaking kid at 12. And so he taught me how to use the Silva method, and he taught me to do affirmations. I recorded those onto cassettes back then for people that remember those. And then we used something called the Silva sound, which today we would call isotonic tones. Okay. And what Silva did, it was a technology-driven meditation, and we used GSR machines or galvanic skin response systems to train the brain. And so that's how I grew up. And then when I went to college, I went to school for electronics. And during that time, of course, electronics was much different back in the 80s than it is, the early 80s than it is today. But I got involved with a company called Light and Sound Research and became their researcher. We took a unit. There was a guy named Dr. Robinson who developed a product called the SILS, sensory input learning system, that was ran by a technician. I was that technician. So when you ran it by hand, of course, it took a person to run the equipment. So unfortunately, he passed away. And when he did, we were trying to recreate it because he kept everything in his own head. He was one of those mad inventors. But because of my background, we were able to figure out what was going on. And we created the very first portable light and sound machine back in '86. Okay. And when we did that, we took it to the Consumer Electronics Show. We got an award in '89 as the best new gadget of the year. And then I started a franchise company. And I've been making these light and sound machines, just basically using light and sound at first. And then as you know, when you're in the industry, people go, hey, what about this? What about that? When lasers became very popular, our doctors, we have 2,400 clinics right now in America using BrainTap as a clinical solution in their practice. So we had a doctor say, what do you think about doing BrainTap? And I do laser therapy. We do auricular therapy. And there's places in the ear where they know, hey, if you use a needle or use a seed or use light now, they know you can do acupuncture with lasers now. So when he did that, I said, wow, I wonder if we could do it with photobiomodulation, which means the red blood cells are going to absorb the light. They're going to circulate through the body and basically bring health back to the body through light. Light is the most underprescribed nutrient today. That's why people have seasonal affective disorders and everything that's going on, because we're in our house too much. We're designed to be outside. When the sun's out, we should be out there hunting and gathering, but we're not. But what happened was we started playing with it, and what really triggered it was autistic children, because they can't, there's no placebo with them. It either works or it doesn't work. They're not thinking about it. And what we found was we could downregulate their stress, because they're either stimming, which means they're hyperactive and they have a lot of beta brainwave activity, or they're in theta, which means they're disassociated. And that's when they become like, people go, oh, Susan's just in a mood right now. Well, the problem is they don't have alpha. So when we couldn't get them to use the equipment at first, because it was just too stimulating for them. Okay. And as soon as we added the ear lights, we were able to use a Noget frequency to calm the nervous system down, to turn off what we call sympathetic system, the fight or flight. And these kids were literally their parents were looking at them, they're going, they're like passing out. But what they were doing, they were going into a deep, relaxing state for 10 minutes. And then afterwards, they were calm. And so we said, well, if it's good enough for the autistic community, we should do it for everyone. And then, each of these technologies are really good on their own. I mean, you can find them out there in the marketplace somewhere, except for, I have developed 1,500 different audio sessions. Of course, those are mine, but there's some like that. I mean, the newness of it is packaging one so that somebody can do their biohacking at one time. And it can be used with other things. That's the nice thing, is with BrainTap, a lot of people will use it with their PEMF or while they're doing another kind of brain hack.
Yeah. The opportunities are endless. And I'm sure for yourself, like even an ideas person, you start seeing all the opportunities. It's like trying to focus on it. So you mentioned a bunch of different things, but like, can I fast forward to like the benefits? Like, what is the byproduct of doing all these things? What would I see as an everyday person? The biggest benefit people will return back, and we've shown in our studies, is that you sleep better. You get deeper sleep. And the more sleep you have, the better your whole system's going to work. We like to tell people sleep is like your superpower incubator. So once you have that, you get that. The next thing you're going to have more focus, more concentration, and energy. We live in an energy economy. If we don't have energy, we can't get anything done. In fact, we can't heal without energy. Yeah. So we're delivering energy directly to the brain so the brain can change. One of our studies showed a 49% neuroplastic change in 6 weeks with dementia patients, where they got taken off the dementia scale within 6 weeks. So, I mean, and these are all studies that are available on, braintapresearch.com. We publish them, and we present them at scientific symposiums too. So it's not like this is just something we made up. We've been studying and doing it. So the other thing is, we have 43 different things we could talk about as far as what it does, as far as symptom solution. For instance, you might be having problems with learning. Well, I wrote a book called Awaken the Genius, but the big part of it is when the brain is operating in its full capacity, we're just smarter. And they've proven this with just music alone. They call it the Mozart effect. When people are listening to this certain kind of music, your brain actually recalls information, processes information better. So we've taken that and basically put it on steroids. We moved it up a notch because we're adding in all this other technology. Really, if somebody is having a problem out there with their life and the stress makes it worse, then we can help with that. Now in sports, right now we're in the middle of a elite sports program study. You have to be a starter in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, or hockey to be a part of the study. We have 15 starters in the study. And what we're showing is a neuroprotective study. And we did this with Jake Pates, who's one of the Olympic snowboarders. While he was using BrainTap, he didn't have any concussive symptoms or any concussive problems. And that's almost impossible as a snowboarder. But the reason is, if you can, instead of having these micro concussions that happen, you start to heal them. So this leads to another that I just want to mention briefly, and another research that's available today. We did a 2-year study with a school in Michigan. Every person that got a concussion in the school, from cheerleaders to football players, they all got the same kind of treatment. Now, he was doing the lymphatic drainage boots at the same time and some other things. So everybody got concussive care, but 50% of them got BrainTap.
A year later, because everybody gets results immediately, they start feeling better than that. But what happens a year later? So we followed them for a year. A year later, we tested them. And what we're publishing is a report. In most cases, they had over 70% improvement in areas of neurological function over the people that didn't use BrainTap.
Wow.
And the least amount was 30% less headaches. But all the rest of the neurological functions were well above 50%. And most of them were around 70% improvement. So the thing is that it's a long-term effect. If you can get to the cause quickly, heal the brain, the body, or what we like to say, the power that made the body can heal the body. But you've got to get it in the right conditions. Right. You got to get the brain in the right place. You got to get the body in the right place, downregulate the sympathetic system, that fight or flight, upregulate parasympathetics. And that's what we're doing.
And it's that downregulation in society now, in modern society, that we struggle with, because we're discovering all these things that even the technology we're using to have this conversation can have some of this slow boiled negative consequence. And now we're almost like salmon swimming upstream with some of it.
Yeah, most people don't realize what even looking at a monitor does to your brain, because our brain, there was a movie out there called Rain Man, where when they dropped toothpicks on the ground and Dustin Hoffman said, 1,253. And he goes, how'd you know that? He goes, I counted them. Well, the reality is that we all count them every time. It's just our brain doesn't process that information to the conscious level. So we're taking in 25,000 pieces of information with sound. We're taking in over 2,000 pieces of information through our eyes. And the screen that has 1 million LEDs that's constantly changing, our brain is constantly trying to figure out, because our brain is always figuring out, okay, what's happening now? What's going to happen next? How am I prepared? Am I safe? Basically our primitive brain is always on red alert. They call it the reticular activating system because it's keeping us safe. And if we don't learn to downregulate that, to recover, like when you're talking about the one thing that I think people are missing in sports, in wellness, is recovery. That's the number one thing. And in fact, we did a study with Kansas City Sport, which is a soccer team out there, and they put in a 20-station brain tapping room because we showed them what happens in recovery after. When you work out, you're going to burn out your body, right? Yeah. So you got to recover. What they were doing was they were going and having a beer or two. So we showed them, it takes about 4 hours for an elite athlete to get back to baseline after a workout. We showed them they could do it in 20 minutes with BrainTap. So they put in the 20-station brain tapping room, because why wait 4 hours when you can start living your life now? Yeah. So we recommend with all of we had a boxer, Corey Anderson was on ESPN, and they interviewed him. And they said, when did you know you were going to win the fight? Because he knocked the guy out in 47 seconds. And he said, well, when I was in the locker room before coming out here, I was doing my brain tap session. I was listening to Step Into the Spotlight of My Life, and I saw myself knocking him out at 47 seconds. So visualization plays a role in it, but also just physiologically getting yourself there. And what he said on Joe Rogan when he was on there, he said the one thing that he does differently is after his workouts, he does a brain tap session for recovery. Recovery is key, because when you stress out, when you do physical exercise, you're really working your brain. Everything you do works out the brain.
Whole body.
But if you have stress, what happens is it delays the healing effect until the stress, all the cortisol levels, all those things go back down to normal. So you can do that quicker. That's why people do like the ice baths and things like that. That's going to help amplify that. Okay.
That is, I'm like, I don't even know where to go with the conversation, only because my head is going to explode with like the use case of it. Like, I'm like, let's get it into every school with the level of anxiety for kids, or,
We have a really cool school in India. It's called the Creative School. And we put a brain tap in every classroom. They have a 12-station brain tapping room for their soccer team. And they also have a grounding. Their whole school is grounded. They have open air rooms. They have plants in every room. I mean, the people that started the Creative School were two of the first 10 into Microsoft. So I don't think money's a problem for them. But it's what they do is the kids, when they start to get stressed out, they can go back and do a brain tap session. And I go there and visit, when we were able to travel, I would go there once or twice a year to check in on them, because that's kind of my passion, because I was a failing student. I got held back in second grade, and then by using not brain tap technology, but technology like it, because my dad was a meditation teacher, it helped me to improve my grades and, get through school.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I want to circle back to the different modalities if we can, and like maybe break down each one. So you mentioned light, sound, and what was
Vibration.
And vibration. Okay. So light, I've heard that recently too, in other conversations I've had where like I think you even mentioned it, like the underutilized nutrient that we need from natural sunlight.
Right. There's a lot of good light therapies out there. Of course, if they come to the Biohacking Congress, you're going to see a bunch of them there. They're all going to be there. So, but when your eyes are closed, your body, your brain, the eyes are not just attached to the brain. Your eyes are actually brain matter. So when you present light, there's a lot of research out there on retinal flashing, they call it. And so what we did was your eyes are closed, so they're not open. But what happens is we're using low level light. We're using 8 LEDs. So it's not a lot of energy because you don't need a lot of energy there. But what happens is it's flickering at a certain speed. So our body is used to Earth frequencies. For instance, Scott, if you and I were on my spaceship and we were coming toward Earth and we were to measure the frequency of the Earth, it would measure between 0.05 and 100. That just happens to be our brain frequencies too. So our brain naturally matches the frequencies of the environment we're in. So if we're near the ocean and we're enjoying it, we're sitting there, we're creating more alpha activity because the ocean resonates at 10 hertz frequency. Also, a fire does. So if you've ever been with a significant other by the fire and you're going to start feeling good and giddy because you start creating acetylcholine during alpha.
Really? So that's why like you're sitting around the campfire, and you just feel relaxed. And it's like, I don't know how many times we're sitting around comfortably with friends and nothing's being said, but you just end up staring at this flickering light.
Right, because it's putting you into an alpha state. Alpha is the neutral for the brain. Okay. So that's why people like to go there when they meditate. Now, the other one is if you can get a little deeper into 7.8 hertz frequency, which happens to be what they call the Schumann frequency or the Earth frequency, because at the mountaintops, it's 7.8. So when we see pictures of people meditating in the mountains, their body is literally resonating at the theta frequency. Theta triggers GABA. GABA is a precursor to DMT. So a lot of people doing plant-based medicine are actually triggering their own brain's DMT because our brain can't process anything it doesn't have receptors for. So when we do a psilocybin,
explain what that is real quick.
What GABA is or DMT?
Yeah, that progression path and what that produces.
Yeah. So what happens? Let's say I'll do it through plant-based medicine first because maybe a lot of listeners, like somebody says, I did a psilocybin or I did DMT. Well, that only works because our brain has receptors for it. Okay. So what we did a study in Dallas with a group of vets who wanted to do a psilocybin with BrainTap. But we had about half of them that did not want to do a psilocybin because they were afraid they were going to get addicted. So what I told Dr. Rosenthal, I said, let's do a brain map on the people doing a psilocybin. So we watched their brains while they're on this trip. And what we noticed was they had a high degree of gamma, which is a higher brainwave. They had a high degree of gamma, high degree of theta. They kind of match up when it's kind of like as above, so below in the brainwaves, because gamma is 30 and 100, 30 up to 100 cycles per second. Now, when that happens, the brain instructs the gut to produce the neurotransmitter GABA. GABA is the one that a lot of people take for better sleep because most people that are not sleeping well don't have theta brainwaves. That's why BrainTap is one of the best solutions for that, because we're going to increase the theta brainwave. But once that happens, it triggers, it's a precursor. So that means when it's available in the body, it triggers the next neurohormonal response. In this case, it's DMT, which is DMT. It's a long name, but basically DMT is the one associated with like spiritual experiences, visualization, basically people having these incredible journeys in their brain or in their mind, or, if it's real, we don't have a passport, so we don't know where people went, but they have these experiences, right? And what they know is at that level, the brain starts rewiring itself. So when you get gamma activity, the brain literally starts reconnecting itself. So the connections that were like the study they did at MIT with blue light therapy at 40 hertz frequency, they showed that in their discovery, they could get 6% increase in gamma, which is pretty good. But BrainTap gets 23% all day long with everybody. So the reason is that we're not staying in one brainwave state. The problem most people have is they go, oh, I'm listening to this alpha tape. I'm listening to this theta tape. That doesn't even matter to the brain. The brain has to have multiple brain waves to efficiently operate. One brainwave itself is not important. So when somebody says, I'm listening to this alpha training on YouTube, well, the brain, after listening to it 3 times, is going to consider it wallpaper. In the same way, it might consider your clothing. You know, when you first put your clothing on in the morning, you're very aware of it. But as you move through the day, you're unaware of it because it's your sensory system says, I don't need to be aware of my clothes anymore. I know they're on. It's not an issue. It's not a threat.
Okay. That's fascinating. So if I understand, you're saying you need multiple brain waves for it to operate at its.
Yeah. When we're awake, we need to have about 45% of our brain in what we call the beta brain or the reactionary brain. That way we can take in information, respond. So you and I, if we went into a deep state of alpha, you know, like you said, you get into the fire, you just start staring at the fire. You don't care about what's going on around you. You just start feeling good. But you need about 30% alpha at the same time, because that's what's going to help you to be creative, problem solving. Those are all critical. That's why under stress, when somebody gets stressed, what they do is they downregulate their alpha and their beta increases. Now they don't have solutions. You become reactionary. That's where the fight or flight comes in. You don't think about other solutions. That's why you go to a friend and they're calm and they're not in the middle of the whole thing and they give you a great solution. You go, man, why didn't I think about that? Well, your brain was not operating in the right brainwave states to get you that piece of information. Each of these brainwaves are like healthy Wi-Fi networks for the body. They're telling the body what to do. Now we don't know everything about brainwaves either. We don't know, even how the brain works. We just know when it's in these different states, you feel good and you get more done, you're more successful, Yeah,
that flow state, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. That high gamma state is a flow state. When we do brain scans with professional athletes or surgeons or people who are really gifted at what they do, they always have a high degree of gamma. It just seems to be a byproduct of it. The people in the flow seem to be in that higher state of consciousness, even though they might not have practiced it. It might just be natural to their brain or their personality.
Or somewhere in there, I guess you just inherently did it and it just became a habit and it just cascades out.
Yeah, exactly.
So sound. I'm interested in sound therapy.
Sound is really important. Just like I was talking about the receptor cells on the body, the biggest sensory-based organ is our skin. But a lot of people think we see with our eyes and hear with our ears. The reality is that we hear and see with both of them. Your eyes are 30% of your hearing. So if you've ever been to a lecture and you couldn't hear the lecturer, but then as soon as you changed your line of sight so you could see them, now you could hear them, that's because our brain is always taking in all this information. Like I said earlier, 25,000 pieces of information. So the brain has to know, what should I focus on with all this noise? And so what we do is we have very specific algorithms with different sounds, and they affect what's called the cortical response in the brain. Deep inside the brain, the primitive brain will pick out these sounds and it will begin to mirror them. We have in our brain what's called mirror neurons. So what it's going to do is it's going to start matching its environment. And because these sounds have specific properties, the brain's going to move within the brain, the electrical system. It's almost like we now know that this wave-like function of our brain waves starts collecting neuroactivity. So the more we get it going in certain regions, the brain gets more energy, starts working. So what sound does, sound is very effective in like binaurals, what's happening with a binaural beat. For people that don't know it, it's actually working on what they call a phantom sound, because you're going to put let's say you want to get a 10 hertz frequency, like we're talking about the fire. We want to mimic the fire. So we would put a 300 hertz frequency in one ear and a 310 hertz frequency in the other. The brain would not hear the 300 or the 310. It actually cancels those out and only hears 10 hertz frequency, because our brain is always measuring the difference, which is kind of spooky to think about, because that's how our eyes work too. They say we render 80% of our reality. They were only seeing 10% on the peripheral, and our brain actually renders the rest of it. That's why when we go out to the kitchen and we say, "Where's the salt?" and our spouse says, "You don't see," and then they walk out and it's right in front of you. They go, "There it is." Your brain didn't render it.
Really?
There. So this also happens with sound. So with binaurals, you have to have matched hearing to make it work right. So what we did is we found out that, it happened with me, I blew out my eardrum, and this ear is only 20% or 80% effective. It lost 20% of its hearing. And so what I did is I started layering the sessions with isochronic tones. Now, an isochronic tone, for people to understand it, it's like a waterfall is an isochronic tone. Okay. It's that when that waterfall
white noise kind of thing.
Yeah, white noise is an isochronic tone. The earth itself resonating at 7.8 hertz frequency, that's an isochronic tone generator. So these are things that only take mono. So you don't have to have stereo headphones on to make it work. A lot of spas now are using that in their spa rooms because they sell Schumann frequency generators. That's 7.8 hertz frequency. And they use them in spas because when you walk into the spa, you sit down and you feel like you're on a mountaintop. You just start relaxing. And that's why also people use music in waiting rooms, the relaxing music, because it starts to downregulate that stress and the brain starts to mimic those sounds.
The elevator music has a purpose.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but some of it, I don't know. Purpose is to destroy your favorite songs, maybe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But yeah, we've all been in the elevator or talking about elevator music where we think, I know that song. And then pretty soon the words start coming in because our brain loves patterns.
Okay.
So that's the whole key here is what's the pattern? And we found out in our research, you have to change that pattern every 3 to 5 seconds or the brain goes away. So our algorithm is a very specific algorithm, and every one of our sessions are different. And one of the things that for sound therapy, just to put it in perspective, we have a study right now going on in Brazil with 150 college students. And our pilot study went like this. We had a 45-minute recording. The first 5 minutes were nothing. The 15 minutes were the music, 5 minutes of nothing called a washout, 15 minutes of that same music with the BrainTap algorithm, and then 5-minute washout. So what we did was every person in the pilot study went through we did an HRV and EEG. So we're measuring both things. They went through the music. Of course, it relaxed them. That's what music does. But every participant in the study at the end of the music went right back to their stress response. Wow. But the music with BrainTap, they went in, and at the end of that, it took 72 hours to get them back to their normal baseline. So that means we're training the brain, because the brain loves to be trained, but if it's just an experience, it's just an experience. The brain just isolates that and says, oh, that's just music. I hear that all the time.
It's more of like a reprieve than a fix, so to speak, or an improvement. Yes. Is that a fair way to state it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty fascinating. So with the BrainTap, you're saying in those similar sounds, it's progressing your baseline away from, I'll say, that fight or flight state.
Yeah. The one paper that we published in 2020 with NIH showed one session on BrainTap, the reduction in stress was 39.8% with 100 people, non-meditators. Then we went on. What's that?
That's a huge improvement.
Oh, yeah. And then what we showed was if they did the BrainTap 3 times a week, that became their baseline. So they wake up out of bed with that or better. So the body learned to move energy. That's really what it is. When you get stressed, and that's why breath therapy, they're going to meet some pretty cool people at the conference with breath therapy, because we're always talking about that with BrainTap. I just published a paper with Ames Bhopal out of India. They're the MIT of India. And we did a project where we did pranayama breathing and matched the hemispheres. And what we showed is by using a breathing technique, you can match the 2 hemispheres like we did in the dementia study, but we did it without equipment. We just did it with breath. So you can do it. What I tell people is we take ancient traditions and we make it modern technology, because you can do all this on your own, of course, but you have to do the work, and it takes a lot of work. So people don't want to do that. So we invented the technology so people just press play and biohack. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, especially your last point on these long-standing traditional practices that have been around for generations, and now science is affirming what it does, and then it's helping it be more prescriptive, it sounds like.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, people are noticing. I mean, now, like, we have a piece of equipment that we designed with a company that we work with in Russia. Unfortunately, right now, it's not a good thing. but They develop. They're the ones that own all the patents on HRV. So if you're going to do something with heart rate variability, you got to work with them. But what we showed, we call it NeuroCheck. So in a 5-minute scan, we can show somebody's system before and after. And if they come to the conference, they're going to be able to do that at the biohacking conference. It's free. We're going to show you what your nervous system looks like, what it's not. And one thing we notice with biohackers is they usually have if they're really doing their biohacking thing and they're measuring things, they have really good nervous systems. You know, when we go to do a medical practice, let's say a medical MD kind of seminar, those doctors are terrible. And same with like my group, I'm a psychologist. They're terrible because they don't deal with their body. They think it's all about pills, or in my group of psychologists think it's all about talking. And, you know, I believe the first phase of all wellness is nutrition. You can't outthink a bad diet. And then number two is you got to get up and move and breathe. You got to get your body active. And then number 3 is you have to have some kind of brain fitness, because our brain will age just by regular use. It's going to have, you know, it's going to, but the reality is, talking about ancient traditions, if you think back to the Native American Indians or the Indians around the world, any tribal culture, they didn't put their wisdom with the youth. Their wisdom with the elders. The problem was that our elders are being put in homes and, you know, basically told you're going to lose your memory, and they don't get to exercise or really use their cognitive functions. And our brain is one of those things, you either use it or you lose it.
Yeah. And, you know, to touch on that, I mean, that's a big area from my understanding is Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, there's some other corollaries that your first pillar of nutrition is a key contributing factor, but the use it or lose it is such a big thing. And then not even just that, it sounds like how you use it is also important.
Yeah. Well, most people, like in recovery, when we're talking about that here with this podcast, most people don't realize one stressful event, your liver produces as much sugar as a candy bar. That's why I like to tell people stress is more fattening than chocolate. Wow. So every stress event, your liver produces the sugar because it thinks you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. You know, it's going to give sugar to the muscles. But then when the sugar gets to the muscles, it says, these are full. You're just sitting in a chair or you're watching the news, you know? So what does it do? It has to create fat, because fat is protecting you from the toxins of the sugar that you just produced. Now, on top of that, if you're having sugar drinks and you're eating a lot of sugar, that's just going to amplify that problem. So when people go, why do we have such a bad problem with diabetes? Well, it's a combination of our diet and our lifestyles in the way we think. You know, those 3 things are all converging to make this a nightmare. The pandemic is a health pandemic, not all this other crap they're talking about. You know, if people are healthy, we're supposed to, I mean, we'll get sick and we'll recover, you know, but if you're not healthy, what happens is you don't have the capacity to heal. So,
and I think what this last 2 years has shown to me is like the amplification of that weak spot, because of the symptomatic spectrum has been all over the place. There's some corollaries, but or common denominators, but it's really amplifying within the individual their gap, which could be a benefit, right? If we realize, okay, this is a gap exposure, now I need to kind of fill it in and support it.
Well, we know now, I'm sure, I know quite a few of my partners in this kind of industry of biohacking. They're in the supplement industry. Mm-hmm. Their sales are just going through the roof because people understand, hey, my government isn't going to take care of me.
Yeah.
They're doing nothing for health. I mean, we have a sick care solution. We don't have a healthcare solution yet. So that's dependent upon like the biohackers and the natural medicine doctors and people who are out there doing that. And, you know, you can't eat Fritos and think you're going to be, you know, sit around munching on what they call hedonistic behavior because you're stressed out sitting in front of the TV. And, you know, our food, unfortunately, has been designed for addiction. It's not, you know, the fat, the sugar, those kind of things. Yeah. So, I mean, we've got to start doing that. And I think part of it is if people aren't used, that's where like BrainTap comes in. When we did our studies with weight loss, we never told anybody to change anything about their diet. But the average weight loss was just under 1 pound a week. When we talked to them about what they did, they said, oh, I changed this, I changed that. Because people inherently know, you know, if you're sitting there drinking a soda, that's not water, that's not healthy, but you do it anyway, you know, because you want the kick from the soda or whatever.
Yeah. And your body starts to crave that. And those cravings are actually your body saying we need it, or want it, I should say, not need it.
Yeah.
But the sound therapy, you made me think of well, you mentioned the visual and the listening connection, where I'll use a personal anecdote. When I'm in a room with a bunch of people and you can't hear the conversation you're in, even if I'm staring at you, and all you hear is that white noise of the room. How does that correlate? Like, can you expound on that or give that example?
Well, what happens is some people can isolate and do that. Other people can't. It just depends on how your brain regulates. Okay. But what's happening is your brain's trying to figure out what's happening, and that's why some people will not go to the mall during Christmas.
Yeah.
They'll do all their Christmas shopping way before Thanksgiving.
Overload.
Yeah, they don't want that sensory overload. So in the process of that, of course, they'll teach. I mean, you'll see even kids wearing those muffs on their ears, because some people just have like spidey senses, or like they can hear much better than other people. So the amazing thing is that people who say they don't hear very well, we've had them comment. They go, "It's really weird. I think my hearing is getting better." No, you're tuning your hearing because we're giving light there. And a lot of the problems we have as we age is neurological, because the nerves are not getting this supplement that they need of light or energy. It's not really light, it's just energy. We need energy. And light bypasses the ATP chain really, and triggers the mitochondrial health and creates what's called vasodilation, blood flow, all those kind of wonderful things that our body needs to heal. Our body really needs nutrients, and it needs to get rid of the toxins, and it needs light and sleep. If we get all those things, then on a very basic level, then we're going to be healthy.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that is it boils down to some I say basic, but foundational things that we will often blow off. But yet the science, what you're saying, keeps pointing to these things that we're empowered to do in many cases.
Right. Well, there's a saying, spirit's simple, man is complex. Really the simplest, Occam's razor, the simplest solution is usually the best, right. But people always want to make it so complicated. Like, I can't tell you how many times over the last 30 years, people have said, that's too easy. It can't possibly do that. Now we have the science that says it does. So we didn't have the science back then. We just had the feeling, and feelings can be misleading, right? One person could feel good, the other person might not. But when you have empirical evidence that shows here's your brain waves before, here's your brain waves after, here's your physiology before, here's your physiology after. And I think that's where the biohacking community's really accelerated it, because they actually show us proof. When you're talking about even recovery, a lot of people think, oh, I feel better because I'll just use an example of some of my clients. I say, what would you rate your health between 1 and 10? And somebody will say 9, but then I look down there on 27 prescriptions. Right. And I go, well, how could you be at a 9? I'm curious here. You're saying you're at a 9. Oh yeah, I take all my drugs. Yeah. I said, you can't be a 9 and be taking even one drug, because that drug is so toxic. It's people think if they take their drugs, they're healthy. That's not the case at all.
Yeah. And I think that goes to reorienting the baseline, like you were kind of mentioning earlier, of like our definition of what health is. And you need the science and the subjective to make a holistic picture, but you need the both, so that you're comparing how I feel. Yes, I feel good today, but I'm on 27 medications. I need to be working my way back.
Right. You need to find out those medications are like putting a black tape over your idiot light on your car that says you need to change your oil. You still have the problem. Right. That's not helping. I mean, most drugs are just reactionary medicine. It's like you throw it into the system. If it works, great. You're getting the symptoms removed, but the underlying problem is still there, and so, with the, like, it amazes me that some people will go on a weight loss diet and their doctor will put them on metformin, to downregulate their blood sugar. Well, why not just not eat sugar, and downregulate your stress, but everybody wants that magic pill, even that movie where the IQ pill, where the guy took the pill and became super smart. Right. That's never going to happen. In fact, there was a research study done in the late 80s and early 90s by the founders of Google and Larry Ellison. They spent almost $1 billion trying to figure out how pharmaceuticals can make them live forever. they realized they couldn't get that solution because it's a, now what they did find, there's a company out there that uses a CPAC. It's a almost like hyperbaric chamber. And they found out that they could reverse a lot of those symptoms. Now, you still got to live with a lifestyle. You can't, it all boils down to eating healthy, moving and breathing, and, doing something for your brain to keep it cognitive, keep the cognitive skill level up.
And that's kind of sounds like where BrainTap kind of comes in and enables that. Yes,
that's where we specialize. I mean, most people that use our app right now, we just went over 5 million listenings on our app, but we had most of them listen to it actually 28 times a month. That's our average. And, people love it. We have less than a 1% churn with people who are using our app with our headset. So when people use it, they get a result, and it's something the family can do. When we're talking about the kids, kids love it. But what we tell people is the parents have to do it first, because kids will follow the leader, right? And
absolutely. Raise a child up as they should go, is the old scripture. That's
right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's solutions out there. And if you can get into it. Now, we actually, when we're at the biohacking, we'll also have one of our skull caps that we have that has light in it. Our science officer actually is the guy who wrote the chapter on photobiomodulation of the brain with Dr. Hamblin from Harvard. Basically the industry textbook. Our guy, my science officer, wrote that chapter, and we designed our helmet after him. And that's one of the ones we use in concussion care, but also for dementia. We're doing another dementia study, because if somebody doesn't have the energy to heal, they can't fix dementia because you don't have the energy. The brain just keeps spiraling. And what that means to the listener is the brain starts to unwire, because there's Hebb's law says those neurons that fire together tend to wire together. Yeah. And those neurons that wire, that don't fire, tend to unwire. But it's all has to do with energy. If you don't have energy in the brain for those neurons to fire, they start unwiring. Yeah. And what we found is there's a book out called Saving Your Brain, which was written by one of our doctors, and he used BrainTap in his study, the one that I was just quoting earlier. And the whole thing is about energy, getting energy back into the brain. If we can do that, and we can measure that now. So if we find somebody is a 20 or below out of 100% energy, then we put them on the light helmet. Now, if you have a light bed out there, or you have red light therapy, then that's what it is. You would use that on the body.
Another benefit, the red light. So as you were talking, and we're getting close to time, but it made me think of other diseases, or it seems like a lot of these diseases are neurologically based. Things like that are underrepresented, like ALS or something like that. I don't know if you've even looked into that aspect.
Right. We've never done any research on those specifically, but we have anecdotal evidence that our doctors report back to us that the symptoms are being relieved. We have people that have Parkinson's that will say the symptoms of the shaking,
have reduced,
tremors,
or improved,
will go away for a day. If they use the BrainTap once a day, they don't have them. Yeah. But it's that would be independent, each person, because we haven't done a certified study on those things.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just curious, because it all seems back to the brain, and there's some kind of disconnect somewhere, literally.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that the brain doesn't know how to disengage. We call it sympathetic escape, because the brain gets so stressed out, it doesn't want to come out. It basically freezes. There's the flight or flight, but most people don't realize before that we have the freeze response. And so they're locked into the freeze response. So the nervous system literally begins to shut down and doesn't function. And then a cascade of neurological activity in a negative way happens. That's why movement and breathing and eating healthy and those things help. That is, you're getting movement again. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, keep it simple, just move. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. That'll start the process of recovery. So vibration, how does that play a role in that? Because I've seen vibration plates, and, you use compression or the Theraguns and things like that.
And we use a sonic wave. It's a device you stand on and use it. But within the BrainTap, we're using it through light and sound to vibrate the frequencies. But there's one scientist, I think it was Al Carter. He's the guy who invented the mini tramp, that did it for NASA, the little trampoline that everybody jumps on. And he said humans should be born with a sign on that says shake well before opening, because what happens is the reason vibration is important is we all know we have a heart and we pump blood through the heart, but next to every heart, every blood vessel, I should say, there's a lymphatic vessel.
Okay.
Our lymphatic system does not have a heart, does not have a pump. The only time that it works is when we do deep breathing or we get vibrated.
Okay.
Okay, so in light therapy will actually trigger the lymphatic system. So what the lymphatic system does, think about it like the garbage man of the system.
Right.
So we always say it's either thoughts, traumas, or toxins. So if you're not clearing out the toxins, a lot of people don't realize that their lymph system that's what metabolic lock is. For people that haven't been able to lose weight, their lymph system isn't carrying the garbage out. The garbage man comes by every Friday, but the trash is on the road, so it can't pick it up.
So real quick, so you're saying you can do all the right things and still not get the right result because maybe, and this might be an underlying issue. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Like for instance, red light therapy. If you're doing red light therapy and you're not using like the sonic plate or some kind of vibration, you're missing a unique opportunity, because red light therapy tricks the body into producing glucagon. Glucagon then tells the body that you're exercising, even though you're just laying there with a red light therapy on you. And so the fat cells open up and release their contents into the lymph system.
Okay.
Now, if you don't exercise right afterwards, or you don't use vibration right afterwards, all that fat goes right back into the cell.
Interesting.
So you can detoxify much faster. We use a big sonic wave because it also has frequencies you can put into it, and they blast you in the speaker. So while you're standing there, we used to have a center in California that was we called it lipo light, because we could show that in one session you could reduce the fat on your body by 2 inches just by doing light therapy, and you'd use the BrainTap in that. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they would get done with that, and then they'd get on the vibration machine. That was the exercise. 10 minutes on that vibration machine is about 30 minutes of actual walking, walking. So it's a really efficient way to exercise.
That's amazing. And maybe think I've got a Therapies infrared sauna. And
yes.
I'm like, I wonder if I should get some big speakers and play some music right in front of me to get some vibration going.
We have, if you do hashtag BrainTap, you'll see us with our Therapies with people using BrainTap at the same time.
Oh, cool.
Because you're not inside. We have one that you go into, but if you have traumatic brain injury, you got to use one of those infrared saunas where your head's out, because you don't want to get your brain that hot, inside the other saunas. So yeah. And you could there are frequencies, a lot of the frequencies out there, like the Solfeggio frequencies. Those are really good while you're doing infrared saunas. But the best thing is after you get done with your sauna, step onto your plate, or you're like, we have the sonic wave. So you would just step on it, and that would start improving and also with the lymph system, just as I don't think I mentioned it earlier, is the brain. If you look at medical books before 2015, they're going to show the lymph system stops at the neck. But in 2016, they realized we have a glial lymphomic system. Now, that's the brain's lymph system. It only opens up during deep level 4 sleep. So if you don't get level 4 sleep, then your brain never detoxes. That lymph system just stays dormant. That's why they didn't even know about it till 2016, because they didn't realize it was connected to sleep cycles. That's
amazing. And it really emphasizes what you said at the beginning of the conversation, which is sleep is, in my words, the largest ROI. And this enables and empowers and facilitates all of that.
Well, so many people because we were brought up with, if you're not doing anything, you're worthless, you're not doing anything. But when you're taking the time to rest and recover, that is going to be, if people will do that, they're going to find the biggest gains that they've ever seen in anything they're doing, because our bodies can't just keep going. We have to learn from animals. Look at, my cats are pretty lazy. I think they sleep 20 hours a day. Dogs, about 14 hours a day. They realize the benefit of recovery. Yeah. But they still can jump up on a table that's, it's like, how do they still keep their strength, and all of those things. So the same thing's true with us if we can do that piece.
Yeah, it makes me think of a couple other things that have a similar, thesis or concept. Like, I'm an endurance runner, so like the Maffetone method of go slow to go fast. Or I've even heard in the military, maybe it's martial arts, is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And it's kind of that similar principle of like, if you actually take the time to slow down, when you want to go fast, you can go faster.
Right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. I think that when you look at the Olympic athletes that were just on television or whatever, they're not straining. They're not struggling. They're doing it with ease, you know, and they now know the more restrictive you are within your body, the less effective you are. We all know that to be true. When we're stressed out, we don't make good decisions. Yep. So and it has to be done before you need it. You know, a lot of people think, well, I'll relax, you know, whenever I need it, you know, I'll relax when I'm tired. Well, if you're tired, you waited too long. Yeah. You know,
that's a great point.
You got to do something it's just like water. If you wait to drink water till you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. You know, that's what most people don't know. That's a sign of dehydration, not a sign of being thirsty.
That's a dashboard light going off. Something's not the way it's supposed to.
Right.
That's a great practical tip.
Yeah. So I think for us, you know, what you're doing on your podcast is right in our line, because we always talk about recovery. Like even when our doctors use it, they do all the other therapies. When you're doing neurological work, it's a lot of energy for the brain.
Yeah.
Before they leave the office, they do the BrainTap to regroup and to recover. Because if you don't have that recovery, they're stressed out. They don't feel good. You know, we've all had a massage and we just don't feel like doing much afterwards. But people that do massages, then they do BrainTap, now they get the relaxation and they have the calm mindset. They have the energy to continue on with their day.
And I think the accessibility of your services with the app, like I'm just thinking practically for myself, you know, 40s, corporate job, my peer sets, they have commutes. That's stressful too. But using the app on the drive home might be an optimal way to, and keep me honest, kind of reclaim some of that brain power, or at least hedge against it, so you can show up well for your family and your spouse and all of that.
Right. Well, you could listen to the music that way, like the SMR, but most of them you have to close your eyes and do the process. So I don't know about, unless you have somebody else driving you, that would be okay.
Get an Uber.
Yeah, there you go.
Patrick, grateful for all your research and your efforts on this. It's just fascinating and encouraged to see this type of thing. And it's starting to get accessible too. I think that's the key point we're at in on a lot of the technologies. Where can folks find you and learn more about BrainTap?
Well, they can actually download the app for free and get a copy of my book, Thrive and Overdrive, that will talk a lot about the things we talked about today at braintap.info. And they can download that for free. It's a 15-day trial. You don't have to put a credit card in or anything. And then you can download the book there. And you keep the book regardless of what you do. It's a full book that will tell you all about the science and what we're talking about. And then they can find us at braintap.com or Dr. Patrick Porter, drpatrickporter.com. And the same, following us on social media, they can do at BrainTap Tech and at Dr. Patrick Porter, and they can see where we're at. But I'm going to encourage everybody to come out to Vegas. If you're in the area, it's always exciting. You'll see technology like ours, but you're going to see a lot of other great technology there too, because I'm a firm believer that one thing isn't it. It's a combination. We love what they call stacking their hacks, I guess is what they call it. And we love it. It's one of our favorite events to go to, is the biohacking event. So encourage everybody to get out there and see us. Yeah,
absolutely. I would agree. And I went to my first one this past October. Mind blown on a lot of things, brilliant people and a lot of great technology and things that can enable and empower us to reclaim our own health. So real quick before we end things though, Patrick, a couple personal questions, a bit of a hot seat. So what are you reading right now?
I'm reading it's called Eternity Life of Graham Simpson, who's a doctor I just met in Las Vegas. Last time I was there, gave me a copy of his book, and I'm reading it while I do my light therapy in the morning. We have a John Ott light, the newest generation that feeds the brain. So I'm under that light every morning.
Okay, cool. What are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
I listen to books on tape.
Okay.
Typically. And so I'm listening to a book right now on the electric brain. It's an Audible that talks about brainwaves. One of my doctors told me about it. So that's what I'm listening to at the moment.
All right, cool.
But I'm always listening to podcasts as well.
Yeah.
Just different people and usually it's one that will come up on my feed about wellness or biohacking.
Great. And last one, what is your go-to rest and recovery method?
Well, if you came to my home, you'd think my game room was a biohacking lab. We have more equipment at the office, but I have a PMF from MagnaWave that actually has built-in sound. So it's a sound lounge with PMF. And I have my BrainTap, and that's my go-to in the middle of the day, about 2:00 in the afternoon. That's when I do my reboot at that time. And usually I'll do it in the morning too, probably 90% of the time, twice a day. Doing that.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for your time, and appreciate you.
All right. Appreciate you too, Scott. Thank you.